Today is a big day, a portentous day for the DOE family, and I think all of us here and around the complex do think of us as a family. And it's a great pleasure as well. It's a great day not only for the department, if I may say, it's a great day for the nation as we join here together to swear in the President's confirmed nominee for Secretary of Energy, Ernest J. Moniz. I would like to acknowledge the presence at the moment and later introduce the President's Science Advisor, Dr. John Holdren. And an especially warm welcome to, come June 9th, Ernie's wife of, if I may disclose this restricted data, 40 years, Naomi. Now, Ernie's is yet another great American story. He is the child of immigrants, Ernest P. and Gina Moniz of the Azores, Portuguese immigrants from a little rock of island out there in the Atlantic. He grew up in Fall River, now Massachusetts, now following in the shoes of the other famous people from Fall River, including Lizzie Borden and George Stephanopoulos. I have had the pleasure to have known and worked with Dr. Moniz for many, many years, and I remember my surprise on one of our trips to Russia when I learned, and I don't know how many here already know, that Ernie growing up was a very talented baseball player, and he played center field, to the extent that he was actually recruited to the Detroit Tigers Major League Baseball organization, and our gain is Major League Baseball's loss. Actually, Ernie never kind of lost his touch, those throws from center field, because many, many years later, I think some people may know this from MIT, people here are familiar from our Feds Feed Families phenomenon that we have dunk tanks in the summer, and some otherwise very dignified individual is asked to sit on a chair above a tub of water. And I will not cast aspersions on the pitching skills of most MIT students. However, Mr. Bob Armstrong, who is working at the MIT Energy Initiative, MIghty, sat there dry as a bone, I believe for a number of seasons, as for $3 a shot, these students would take their chance at trying to get Bob in the water. One day, Ernie was walking by, he says, "Let me try that thing, I'll give you $3. First pitch, boom, in the water." It was a great day just a few weeks ago, I think it was, when the President nominated Ernie for this position. And in addition to Naomi, Ernie was joined on that occasion by his lovely daughter Katya and by Alexander and Eve, his adorable grandchildren. And no offense to any of the grown-ups, but I think it's fair to say that the President had the most fun with the grandkids. All that having been said, make no mistake about it, when it comes to energy matters, the President is deadly serious about the mission of our country, and I will just briefly quote what the President said at the State of the Union because it bears directly on today's events. "After years of talking about it, we are finally poised to control our own energy future. But for the sake of our children and our future, we must do more to combat climate change." The President called for his cabinet, and again I'm quoting, "to come up with executive actions we can take now and in the future to reduce pollution, prepare our communities for the consequences of climate change, and speed the transition to more sustainable forms of energy." I say without fear of contradiction in this, the President could not have selected a better individual to lead that charge than Dr. Moniz. Now, the outlines of Dr. Moniz's biography are well known. He has been a faculty member at MIT since 1973, the Cecil and Ida Green Professor of Physics and Engineering Systems. He has headed the Department of Physics and the Bates Linear Accelerator Center and served as the director of the MIT Energy Initiative and the MIT Laboratory for Energy and the Environment. I first had the opportunity to meet Dr. Moniz back in 1995 when he was serving at the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House, and we continued as colleagues as he served with great distinction here at the department from 1997 to 2001 as undersecretary, back in the days when there was only one undersecretary. So that gave Dr. Moniz a broad remit responsible for overseeing the department's science and energy programs. He led a comprehensive review of nuclear weapons stockpile stewardship and served as the Secretary's special negotiator for the disposition of Russian nuclear materials. Now, it's no surprise that while out of government, Dr. Moniz was widely consulted on a number of matters for his wisdom and guidance, including the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, the Department of Defense Threat Reduction Advisory Committee, and the Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future. Rounding out his credentials, Dr. Moniz is a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the Humboldt Foundation, the American Physical Society, and the Council on Foreign Relations. And on this last point, I think it's very important to note that his great experience in diplomacy and his international activities well suit him to the other very critical part of the President's DOE agenda to advance our national security and our nuclear security. But that's all the official biography. I just want to close by talking about Ernie Moniz as an individual. He is an extraordinary person, and I think the first thing anyone would notice is he is a person of great directness, of integrity, of honesty. He is great to travel with. He opened his first meeting after nominated by saying he was going to be very interactive, and I think the number of people who I've seen waving in the hallways show that that's already the case. And he ended his first meeting by saying, "We're going to have fun," and I'm sure we are. He understands human nature and is able to bring out the best in people, whether they are friends, families, or colleagues. As Leonid Brezhnev would have said, it is no coincidence that he was confirmed by a 97-0 vote. One of the senators who was very involved said, "I couldn't get that many votes for a can of soda." And so that's an auspicious beginning indeed. To paraphrase what Oliver Wendell Holmes said about President-elect Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in Ernie Moniz, we have a first-class intellect and a first-class temperament. Now it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce to the stage the President's science advisor, not only a distinguished scientist in his own right, but an avid fly fisherman, Dr. John Holdren.
Well, thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to start by saying that President Obama could not be happier that his choice to be the next Secretary of Energy has been confirmed after a relatively short delay and by 97-0. I did have to ask Ernie after he was confirmed what he did wrong to get some of those votes, but he is unquestionably, in my view, the best qualified incoming Secretary of Energy in history. As you've already heard from Dan Poneman, he knows energy, he knows stockpile stewardship, he knows nuclear weapons, he knows nuclear weapon materials, he knows environment, and he is an individual who will be able to work with everybody that he needs to work with to get this job done. I had the pleasure of working with Ernie when he was the Associate Director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy for Science in the Clinton administration, and then when he was the Undersecretary of Energy. That time I was a member of PCAST, the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. We sort of shifted roles in the first Obama term when Ernie was a member of PCAST and I was in OSTP. But we've been partners for a long time. I don't want to say partners in crime. Neither of us has done anything indictable. But we have certainly been we have certainly been co-conspirators, and we intend to continue to be. I think this is going to be a fabulously collaborative second term in the Obama administration. We know that Ernie has terrific relations with the other key members of the cabinet and with the folks in the White House who are going to be addressing the whole panoply of issues which are this department's mission. And I certainly look forward enormously to working with Ernie in this capacity, and I know that President Obama does. So with that, let me take no more of your time. Let's get to the main event, the swearing in of Professor Ernie Moniz as your Secretary of Energy. Thank you.
Okay, so he's there.
And you just switch positions.
Oh, okay. Small detail, the oath. Yeah. I haven't memorized this. Okay. And when it says state your name, don't say state your name.
Okay.
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 Okay. Now what do I go like this as well? Okay.
I, Ernest Moniz,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support and defend the Constitution
enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
that I take this obligation freely without any purpose,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental, say it again,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office
and I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office
on which I am about to enter,
on which I am about to enter,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations. All right. That's good. Okay.
Well, thank you, Dan. Thanks to all of you who have come here. Dan has done great service already for this department, as you all know, 4 years, the last month, and sometime going forward. We are going to have fun and move forward the agenda that we've already discussed. John Holdren, dear old friend, sharing many of our passions around the energy and climate, nuclear security agendas, fly fishing, and for a long time a shared home in Cambridge where John came from the Divinity School up the river from MIT. I do want to thank John for his comment about qualification, but I must, you probably want to withdraw it already because Poneman's apocryphal story of the Detroit Tigers was a little bit over the top. I was invited to a tryout camp, that's all. But anyway, and of course, Naomi, as Dan mentioned, although, okay, I will do the update on the Al Franken routine, now 39.95 years of marriage. She also, you might want to know, she spent 25 years here on the Georgetown faculty, and so this is kind of a return to the commuting life, but in the opposite direction. Look, I'm thrilled to be back at DOE. This did lead to many members of Congress starting out with hints about questions of sanity. And of course, there is the standard Johnson reply of, like second marriage, the triumph of hope over experience. But I want to say that, first of all, 39.95 years, my experience hasn't been so bad. Neither was that experience anything other than terrific in my first go-around at this department. You know, it was also a time, the late 90s, of, say, a lack of certain political comity. But think about in those years, and many of my colleagues there are here, we really did move out in establishing electricity programs, large-scale computation, modeling as a discovery tool. We advanced science-based stockpile stewardship without testing, built major science facilities like spallation neutron source, novel uses of the petroleum reserve. We built environmental management technology programs. We had major progress on global nuclear materials security and disposal, especially in Russia, HEU deal, for example, and more. These were enduring contributions, and sometimes I think we don't sit back and have a perspective about all that this department does and all that this department accomplishes. So, in the hope over experience, I have every reason to hope that we can do that and better in advancing President Obama's priorities. And 97-0, as referenced, I think, does give us an opportunity that we can't squander. So that brings me back to the President's agenda, and I want to just elaborate briefly because this is, I think, what we are all going to be trying to push going forward. Number one, the clean energy and climate agenda. Look, I mean, all said and done, that fundamentally is the real driver, certainly, of my coming back to help advance the President's and this department's agenda. We want to build on what was done by Secretary Chu, who really changed the face of energy technology innovation at the Department of Energy. But we need to go beyond this. For example, in a couple hours, I'll have my first public remarks. It'll be on energy efficiency, a really important focal point for us going forward in this environment. It's something that I think we can do. We all know there's legislation out there right now, bipartisan legislation. So let's build on that. The time is right. Very importantly, and John Holdren has mentioned PCAST. John has done a fabulous job in how PCAST has contributed to this administration's agenda. Of course, he's done it because the President has been deeply interested in working with us. One of the issues put forward by PCAST a couple years ago was a new approach to trying to get an administration-wide energy policy called the Quadrennial Energy Review. We're going to be working shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand, on getting that done with our colleagues across the administration. Electricity grids, robustness, resilience. This department had a huge role, for example, with Hurricane Sandy. And in fact, the President was here just 2 weeks ago in preparation for the hurricane season and this department's role with the country's utilities in making sure we can keep the lights on for our citizens. The Blue Ribbon Commission mentioned, a new approach, consent-based, new organization, all of this to work out in these next several years, hopefully put the nuclear waste issues back on track, and many other energy initiatives. So these are just all in the kind of the energy sphere, and you can see we have a full plate and very, very important things to address. And also, let me make it very clear that there is no ambiguity in terms of the scientific basis calling for a prudent response on climate change. I am not interested in debating what's not debatable. There's plenty to debate as we try to move forward on our climate agenda. Secondly, and mentioned already, the second major intersection of our program with the President's high-level priorities, energy and climate being the first, is in fact nuclear security. Safe and reliable nuclear stockpile. We should remember the President's positions, trying to lower our number of deployed weapons, returning to the idea of comprehensive test ban. Those are impossible if the Department of Energy does not do its job in terms of maintaining a reliable stockpile 1 year down the road, 10 years down the road, 50 years down the road, and that is a complex program, but a critical priority for this department. The second is the issues around, for example, nuclear terrorism, based on the risk of nuclear weapons material falling into the wrong hands. Again, this department, as you know, has a huge role both in the nonproliferation program and in its intelligence programs, which play a critical role in nuclear security. This is a big deal, and certainly Dan and I are going to work probably especially closely on these issues while we attend to the full range of the department's missions. The President believes also in the importance of a robust scientific research infrastructure, strong support for research, and the buildup of human capacity. DOE, as you all know, is kind of a backbone for especially the physical science enterprise in this country. We have a challenging environment, a budget environment, not only for science, for other programs, but my view is, I want to say where I'm coming from is, you know, this department has done a whole string of new things in this area, providing new tools for our scientists. We can't stop. We have to do new things. And in doing so, I want to also emphasize that I think we need to really amplify the role of our lab directors, for example, as strategic partners in figuring out how are we going to accomplish that, no matter what the boundary conditions are in terms of the budget environment, for example. Fourth, of course, we have the legal and moral responsibility to clean up the Cold War legacy, including attention to the communities and workforce as we go into a somewhat uncertain future, again, especially in terms of the budget environment. So, paraphrasing another old friend who may be somewhere in here, Vic Reese, this is those four missions. This is a department of windmills and weapons, quarks and quagmires. We are really in the game. Finally, I want to say that with these very important mission responsibilities, as I say, many of them intersecting the President's agenda at the very highest level, to achieve our goals, we are going to have to raise our game, raise our focus on management performance. We're going to have to consider how to do that best organizationally, and this will entail a lot of dialogue, both internally and externally, and as those ideas are shaped, many of you are going to be involved in those discussions because, again, this is a key enabler for us to do our job in climate, in nuclear security, in science, and in environmental management. Another near-term issue is we need to complete the bench. As you all know, we have many Senate-confirmed positions, senior advisor roles that we need to fill to get the team fully in place. And this process is starting. There'll be some announcements very soon. But I want to stress, it's not that we have an empty bench. Far from it. We have very talented people staying on the advisor role, and we have, of course, very strong career ranks. And I want to work with you very, very closely. I know many of you and have great respect for your dedication and talents. But, you know, just like a playoff team with injuries, we play the team we have, and we expect success. And that, again, is going to span across our advisor ranks, our PASs, and our career ranks. And, you know, we will also provide opportunities to fail, because we're going to go after some stretch goals, and I think if they're the right ones, then we're doing the right thing. On January 20th, 2017, I hope we can all look back on 3.5 years and say that we accomplished important work for the President and the American people. And finally, I want to add that there's been a terrific group who shepherded my nomination process, both at DOE and the White House. I just want to single out 3 people who I know extended their stays here at DOE specifically to see this through, Holdren all, in the spirit of public service, even as the tugs of family and private sector opportunities got more intense. Brandon Hurlbert, Jeff Navin, out of the Chief of Staff Office. Jeff is taking a little interlude in Italy, I believe, but we'll be back in the saddle in a couple of weeks. Jeff Lane, head of our government intergovernmental. I mean, again, these people really hung in and stretched out their commitments here to help this through. We appreciate it. We're very, very grateful. There are many others who signed up for the new team and will hold their recognition until January 20th, 2017, as we stagger to the finish line. So I look forward to working with you. We have a great opportunity. And tomorrow we'll do a webcast throughout the whole complex. Act surprised when you hear many of the same messages. And thanks again to Dan and John, who are both going to be really critical partners for us moving forward. Thank you all, and I hope we can stay around a few minutes and get to meet each other. Thank you.